Hi, I'm Nancy Snoke.
I'm Phoenix Snoke.
Are we really loud?
Yeah, we sounded really loud there, but now, is this better?
Fine, I'll turn it down.
Okay. And our talk is Hacking the IoT, a case study. So first, how this talk is organized. So we're going to do our contact information at the end for anyone who wants to know. But we have some candy left over from another event with our contact information if anyone would like it. So I was going to pass it around now. Then we're going to do a little introduction. And then we're going to do a brief look at IoT Security Standards. Yes. We'll talk about our methodology and our results, and then how you can set up your own IoT hacking lab. And then we'll do our contact info and questions. Would anyone else over here like candy?
Nobody was passing it, so.
Yeah, it's chocolate. Here. Pass it around.
Take it, animals.
Okay, so why a talk on the IoT? Well, there's all these news stories about people being concerned about insecure devices, the Bricker-backed vigilante worm, botnets. There are people building Skynet. Can the IoT ever be secure?
In terms of whether the IoT can be secure, I'm sure it could be. However, at this point, at a minimum, it seems like there's kind of an entire generation of devices that are already out there that the support for them is questionable at best. So there's already a lot of insecure devices out there to begin with. Additionally, this is a really, really large market, and it's been expanding very quickly. So there are actually some concerns, without trying to sound too paranoid, but there are concerns with these companies getting people's data, and whether the companies are using them for bad purposes or not, they're not storing the data in secure manners, so it could be somebody entirely unrelated to the company or the device getting your access to this data and using it for malicious purposes.
And we thought, everyone else is hacking IoT devices, why shouldn't we? So then we had to decide what type of device to hack. And we just one day went out and bought a smart light bulb. Not this one, I will say, this is just the picture I chose. The one we bought, I couldn't find a picture of, because it totally didn't work when we got home. I mean, it's a nice light bulb, but the whole internet part didn't work.
We have found out after the fact that apparently they had some problems with it, and they decided to patch out internet access with the intent of patching it back in later. Whoops.
It's secure.
Yeah, it is secure.
It's a nice light bulb. We do use it for that. So we decided to do a little research before buying another IoT device. And so the next thing we considered was this great smart egg tray. But it lets you know when you're out of eggs, but you have to remove your egg from the carton and actually put them in it for it to work, and that was a little too annoying for us. Then there was, of course, the Nest thermostat, but that's already been done to death. My husband's favorite.
Yeah, the Wi-Fi enabled crockpot, because I'm not entirely sure what the safety protocols on that are with regards to the heating element, and there's kind of a part of me that kind of finds the whole concept of burning your house down appealing from remotely, but I probably should stop there.
Yeah, we vetoed trying to break the heating element on that, and so we decided we should get something else. Then there was...
we're continuing with his theme of uncomfortable medical analogies.
And then we looked at the smart water bottle in case you needed something that told you when you were thirsty. It would glow when it thought you were thirsty. But yeah, this also seemed like a bit of a stupid idea, so we ended up going with a baby monitor. So why a baby monitor? Well, I guess last year everyone started saying we should buy one for some reason, because we had this little guy. And we were like, well, why do we need a baby monitor? Oh yeah, that was the wrong picture. There we go. Much cuter. We were like, well, we can always hack it. So we were like, sure, we'll get one. So we got this one. No, we're not showing you all the name because we did responsibly disclose what we found and they didn't respond in any way. This was months ago. So we decided it was okay to present as long as we didn't let people know who the device was. So we sort of took out the name. Yeah, you could probably...
There's not enough there.
The company's changed names like 3 times, I think, since we bought this.
Well, if you really looked for it, you could probably figure it out, I figure, but we're just figured we'll try to be at least a bit more responsible here, and we'd like to do this. Oh, and it was the #1 bestseller. So, another reason to look at this device. So, before we jump into this device, our brief look at IoT Security Standards. I'll just mention there's Pony Express puts out the Internet of Evil Things report, which basically, according to the last one, quick summary was everyone knows there's tons of problems on the Internet of Things and no one is spending any money to do anything about it. I think that's probably the 2-sentence summary. Last July, I think it was, NIST did put out their special publication 800-183 called The Network of Things, which is a basis for talking about the Internet of Things in terms of security. It doesn't actually get into security, but it sort of starts dividing things out so you can talk about it. And they divided it into 5 sections, similar to what we did, except slightly different. They had the sensor, which was like the hardware, the aggregator, which was software that controlled that, the communication channel, obviously the network, the external utilities, which are like the mobile and web apps, and the decision trigger, which was more software. And then Microsoft has some data.
Microsoft is apparently attempting to do some stuff for securing Internet of Things devices. In their case, though, I know that they're not done with it, but it was supposed to be that they're actually doing it at the manufacturer level with third-party vendors. So I don't really want to say anything about it because, I mean, it might be wonderful, it might be bad, but it's not done. So, it's really hard to kind of judge it. But Microsoft is one of the companies working on it. Again, I know Intel's working on some standard stuff, too.
Well, I will judge the Microsoft stuff a little bit. It was very Microsoft-centric, so you couldn't extrapolate it out generally, what I saw.
Yeah, the thing with the Microsoft stuff was that they were actually trying to control the entire process. So while there might be third-party vendors, that Microsoft was controlling the firmware aspects of it.
All right, so before we started testing, the first thing we did was we took a look at the packaging, and we read the manual that came with it. We set up a segregated test network, and we brainstormed some ideal attacks. And that was going to help us when we went through testing, because this was our goal, so we'd know what we were looking for to try to daisy chain things together that we found to reach one of these ideals. Okay, so what about the packaging? As you see, it makes you think it's very insecure right here, because we get this login ID and password on the box. Note the password is admin. But it's not quite as bad as you think, because the first time you do log in and with the device, it makes you change this. Not because it's the first time you log in, but because they require at least 6 characters for a password. So, but let's see, the manual had some other nice information in it about authentication authorization, which was interesting. Like, you had 2 accounts. So you had your account, and you added your cameras to it, and this was the camera, specifically, that you could log into. And there were no forgot password mechanisms. So if you forgot your password, you had to create a new account. And so you could obviously add cameras to many accounts, and that would never look suspicious, since that was the forgot password mechanism. If you forgot your camera password, you had to do a hardware reset to put it back in its default configuration. So it also had some information about guest accounts and authorization, which looked interesting too in terms of testing.
Now for the, we split our testing up based on what we were interested in. So I took the parts that I was interested in and she took the parts that she was interested in. I did the networking stuff on it, and for the first part of it, obviously we had a segregated test network. I don't know how secure or insecure this device is, so I don't want to hook it up to my home computer.
So just to be clear, this is your home computer?
Yes.
Random Google pic.
It's a random picture. Mine is much more modest. But This part's pretty easy. I mean, we just bought a router and ran it off the other ones. So, but they have both networks were segregated, but you can still have internet access. In terms of the ideal attacks that we were doing, I'll let her picture hers in a moment here. But what I wanted to do was insert fake pictures and videos into the feed because I just thought it would be funny. And so you wanted to do device pairing?
Yeah, I just thought the device pairing of the camera with the apps was an interesting spot to try. And obviously, as I said about our ideal attacks, we were going to go through and enumerate all the bugs and vulnerabilities and then try to see how we could put together one of these attacks. So we came up with 5 areas of the IoT device: the mobile app, the network, the web app, the API, and the hardware. And my husband is talking about the network and the hardware, and I'm going to cover the mobile, the web apps, and the API. And the web app and the API sort of merge. It's hard to differentiate exactly where one begins and the other. And yes, we were trying not to break any laws, and so everything involving the external web application, APIs, and the external network was lightly tested. Mostly it was passive observation. We didn't want to do anything wrong. All right, so the mobile app. So basically there are 3 parts to testing a mobile app for both Android and iOS. You have your static testing, your dynamic testing, and your network testing. And for Android, the static is really useful, obviously, because you can just decompile it, and get your Java code and just go through it if you're good at coding, and it's really easy to look at. For iOS, it's more of a reverse engineering IO hopper after you extract the encrypted app from memory. So it's a bit more complicated. Of course, there are tools that will do that extraction for you, but it's fun to walk through once on your own if you're getting to know iOS anyway, to manually go through that. But dynamic testing on Android, that's mostly using the Android Debug bridge. And for iOS, I mostly use Segregated to get in and do things when the app is actually running. And I did all my network testing using Burp Suite. Now, I don't look at any of the network results on any slides. I'll just mention that neither mobile app did any certificate validation whatsoever. So I could just use Burp Suite, didn't have to import the CA, nothing. Okay, so just a few of my results. I'm not going to go into everything in detail because it would take too long. But yeah, I found insecure data storage, insecure communication, insufficient cryptography, extraneous functionality, and improper platform usage, which is 5 of the top 10, OS top 10 for mobile.
So what was insufficient about cryptography?
Oh, we'll get to that one.
Okay. Just
It's
wait.
a surprise.
113.
It's sort of my nemesis. I find this cryptography algorithm way too often. But some mobile app findings. Just a couple things I found in the Java code that were sort of interesting. Here's where it validated if you had a good camera ID, and you could see it just looked to see if it was 13 characters and started with that. So you can probably enumerate all the cameras out there. Here's a developer options password validation, which was just this hard-coded string. Let's see. Now this was, yes, some cryptography that I saw in there that they were using, and anyone care to guess what algorithm it was?
No,
Excellent. Slightly better. Excellent.
It was actually a single des.
Oh.
Yes, and unfortunately, I've seen this in at least 3 places in the past 2 years when I've been looking at things. It's just like, the first time I almost had an asthma attack and started laughing hysterically, and now just like, what, again? But yes. They did have other cryptography I'll mention too. They used it in several places and did several different things. Here's some where in the Android app they just stored the account usernames and passwords. So in plain text on the device. There's some other interesting things in the other shared preference file, including more usernames and some settings to turn on developer mode, where you could set encryption on and off. hid the IP addresses, as you can see, because, again, trying to protect this a bit, but where the server was. And most of yes, okay. And let's see, oh yes, it was really easy to get into the developer options. In fact, I think I did that in 3 different ways. It was the same hard-coded password in both iOS and Android. Also the fun things. They actually did have some forgot password functionality, even though it specifically says there isn't any. And I'm just going to stop there and we can talk about more.
Now, we previously did this talk at NOLACon, and one of the things that we got a lot of feedback on was the hardware part. So we're trying to cut the other parts shorter so we can talk more about the hardware, since that's going to be something more people are interested in. That and, I mean, the network methodology, we really didn't do a lot of cool things with it because it just wasn't necessary. Use Nmap for it to just, enumerate the network, and then as far as observing the internal and external traffic, use Wireshark and aircraft. The one finding that I had with it is that, there's all that. The asterisk thing I thought was weird, so I made a note of it to look for it later because when I looked it up on Google, it came up as a protocol for air traffic control towers. And I was pretty sure that that wasn't right. Additionally, you could go and you could open telnet sessions with it. Now on this, there was a setting to turn the device itself up on the web app to turn it into an access point. Additionally, it would go through and tell you every network it was in range of that it could see. This is beyond the scope of this talk, but there are attacks that you can take that information and coordinate roughly somebody's physical location. And the other nice finding on it is that there was no password or encryption if you set this as an access point. Additionally, there was no encryption whatsoever on the video or still image feeds. So you could find out around where somebody lived and then just war dial up and down the street until you hit it. Obviously, that's really, since these devices are for physical security, that's kind of a significant problem. But now for the, I did something to this.
On the bottom. Press the bottom.
Oh, sorry.
All right. So just quickly, the web application methodology, because everyone's familiar, or at least most people are familiar with this. It's just like testing any web app. You want to look at your authentication, your authorization, session management, whether there's injection, client-side code, all the normal things. Well, the first thing I discovered on accident, because as a joke, I named the device script alert 1/script, and yes, it was a cross-site scripting. I just thought it would be a funny name for my device. Not even really testing. As I said, we're trying to be careful about the external website and not really do too much. But I did notice going through, just looking at the HTML that they had, it was the weirdest HTML there was because it was like, it told you about all these other sites inside it. So it was like it was a shell, basically, this thing that they use for lots of different sites. And so you found all these other versions of this web app that were out online, including some test versions and debug versions, things that were literally called that you were all out there if you went and browsed to them. And it was all just in the basic HTML when you went there. And so on one of the test ones, they had the spot where you could download a Windows, an Android, an iPhone, and a Mac version of a tool for this camera, as well as more documentation and, yeah, a test version of the app that you could just log into online. I didn't really like doing that even that much. I figured it was passively observing, so we did go look at it. So I thought that was very odd. Also, you may have noticed when he did the network enumeration, there was an internal web app. Port 80 was open, so we could look at that locally. And so there, you could do more, in my opinion. And so there, it brought up an app very similar to the one that was online here. And that's where I looked at the client-side code, because there's a ton of JavaScript and also a Flash plugin. The Flash plugin was actually of interest. because it was what they used for the live stream of the cameras. And basically, it was an RSTP-based protocol with some built-in authentication. But the authentication was only one way, so the client would authenticate with the server and just got back that it was okay from the server, but the server didn't authenticate the client. It was weird.
And this was an unencrypted web traffic, so you could get the credentials and say, oh yeah, I'm the camera. This is totally legit. The other thing about it too with the web app was that we noticed what she was bringing up about the multiple pages. There were about 25 or so before I stopped trying to count identical portals on different IP addresses for just the main app. There was also stuff in the JavaScript about if camera equals X brand, go to this page. If it equals this brand, go to this page. Apparently, they like to change their names very frequently for some reason.
And their branding, so they look a little different. Yeah. All right, so now I'm going to go into the API methodology, which is sort of just part of the web app in a way, except it's a little different because you can't browse to it. But it's very similar to the web app, except no app. And basically, the first step was to try to enumerate all the API calls there were, and then check for all your common problems, like port transport security, IDOR, access control problems, sensitive data exposure, port key handling are the common things with APIs. So I found the complete enumeration of the API in two places. It was actually completely in the JavaScript on the web app. Because it had basically, the JavaScript made all the API calls, so you could see them. It was also in the Java code for the mobile app. So you could completely enumerate everything in the API. And so then after doing that, I tried replaying all the API commands and seeing what we could get. And there's no session on any of this. And so even a week later, all the API commands would still work. So then I started doing integrity checking to see if we could change up parameters. And sometimes that worked, sometimes it didn't. I think that the ones that didn't work, it was probably due to some malfunction in their code more than anything else. So yes, some of them worked, some of them didn't. It was just random, as far as I can tell, but I made note of it. Also, when going through all the API, you could find some interesting information, like here, where it was asking about the NTP server. It also tells you about this Debug telnet, which I didn't go to at all, but it's very tempting. But yeah. And some other random servers, but the Debug telnet one was the one I first yelled at YouTube. Oh, I want to go see what's there.
Completely innocent, sure. Completely innocent.
Very possibly. Anyway, now.
In terms of the hardware, I kind of wanted to preface this with I don't really have a strong hardware background in this sort of thing. So if I can figure this stuff out, pretty much all of you should be able to too. It's, you guys came up here, so obviously you're wanting to learn how to do things. So I mean, don't let the fact that you might be afraid of setting something on fire or anything bad like that, dissuade you from your dreams. Anyhow, what we wanted to do initially was just basically take the device apart so I could see what it was, like, see if I could identify the board, the Wi-Fi card, look for any sort of known vulnerabilities for it. Also, I did this last, obviously, because, I wasn't really sure I wasn't going to set anything on fire. But you could buy multiple devices in theory. I'm kind of crabby and cheap, so I wanted to just do it last instead. What you want to do is you want to look for a Debug UART port. And then you also want to look at how the firmware updates, so you can see if you can get a copy of the firmware, if you can install your own firmware, and then does it have any sort of integrity checking. As a side note on this, the web app had a process of updating the firmware, but you could only do it if you were going from within your own network. You couldn't do it remotely. In terms of the hardware finding, one look for the debug port. I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but it was kind of easy to find. So what I did was I just took some random jumper cables that we had from an electronics kit, soldered them to the UART port after using a multimeter to determine which port was which, and then just ran it through to a TTL to USB, and then hooked it up to a Raspberry Pi. Since I didn't want to hook anything, I had soldered myself up to my home computer.
And that worked.
It worked, surprisingly enough. But here's what we had on the web app for the online update too, where you could do the through the internal network where you could update the firmware. In terms of any sort of checking, there actually was one. You couldn't see it through the web app. You could see it through the hardware though. But the CRC would fail every time. However, within boot is normal. Additionally, without doing anything at all, the CRC failed. So if you didn't touch the device in any way, shape, or form, the CRC fails every time for whatever reason, and then just goes on boots.
What he wasn't saying was when you click the upgrade button here, you could get a copy of the file, but it was a little roundabout. You had to be monitoring your whole network because this sent a request out to one of those outside servers. An outside server would contact your camera with the file. So if you had your whole network being monitored, you could grab the file.
Right. It didn't send like an exe or bin. It wasn't sending like an exe or bin file that you could run from your computer. It actually sent it straight to the camera.
Okay.
And additionally, obviously, if you're hooked up to the hardware, like I was able to do in that, in my case, you could just run it straight through. The other thing about it was that in terms of, well, let me see if we have enough time. I'll try to go into it a little bit more if we have enough time. Oh, can I? Okay. But when I booted the device up, or after I did the hardware hack on it, it was really hard to get into. There was a thing that said press any key to stop it from booting. I figured that part out pretty quickly. Once you were able to do that, it interrupts the boot sequence. Then you could go in, you could download the firmware. If you wanted to, at that point, put in something that you made yourself, or just sort of look around the files, you could do that. There wasn't any sort of login that you needed to do. The one big thing I noticed with this, which might have been one of the reasons that had all this flakiness in terms of some of the application stuff, is there was a lot of extraneous code. It looked like, and from my understanding, this is a semi-common practice, that they basically just cut and pasted a lot of code from random devices. So there were drivers for network cards that aren't for this camera. There was some stuff for cameras that, like for the actual camera hardware, that isn't part of this. And there was actually some stuff for the control board that, again, it was for something that it was just completely random as far as I could tell. Which might be why some of the things when we tried to dial out to them didn't necessarily respond that reliably.
This was really your slide, but
oh yes.
There's also on the internal web app, you didn't have to go through the firmware. They had a nice upload button, so you could just get it any file you wanted, and it would upload it to the firmware.
But I wanted it to do it through the wires I soldered.
So you could do it both ways.
Yes.
Now, in terms of seeing if we could screw with the video feed, that is obviously not my pleasant son. Additionally, this was from the web portal. Additionally, I didn't take a time and date screenshot there, but the only time and dates that you had, if you had that option enabled, it was through the web portal itself and showed you the current time and date on the web portal. So if you're going through and taking that, intercepting the traffic and replacing it, if somebody was looking at it, the time would tell them the current time. I'm sure you can see where this is a huge security vulnerability because there'd be no way for someone to know if the footage that they're looking at was from last week or if it was actually current.
So this was really a combination of the fact that they pretty much had no security on their network stuff, no encryption, handshaking sort of stuff going on with that in the device, and the fact that we had reverse engineered the flash file to know what it was expecting. So we sent the flash player that was giving the stream exactly what it was expecting in the packets, and it just was basically like a man-in-the-middle sort of attack that did this. So, all right. So our conclusion: IoT devices are easy to hack.
Surprise.
Further, is there a way to use this device if we wanted to as a baby camera? Well, if it's not on any network that's connected to the internet, you can log into the internal web app And you can view images, although you can't move the camera around or do some of the functionality without internet access.
Actually, and it's a still image from when you log into the camera. It doesn't ever update. So I actually think that this part is a flaw.
You can refresh
that you're able to. If you refresh it and re-log in, it would update the picture. But other than that, it doesn't update the still image. So I think that was actually a flaw that let you see that.
So yes, they don't like you using this without internet.
Which totally is not shade.
So about setting up your own IoT lab. So we'll just go through some of the things we use for all of our different steps. And together, you have an IoT lab. So first, for Android, obviously you want a computer. I only mention that because you really would like an Intel processor for the hardware acceleration modules for the emulators. Because they're really slow without the hardware acceleration. You're probably going to use Android Studio and the SDK toolkits and the Android emulators and get lots of versions downloaded, both ARM and x86. And every time you do an ARM one, it will yell at you about how this is slow. But sometimes you need them for when the apps that you're trying to go through have architecture-specific libraries. And that's unless you want to do it on real devices. If you have a lot of real devices, that's fine. You can do that instead. Obviously, you're going to use other tools that go with Android Studio, like the Android Debug Bridge to get shell and install APKs and get APKs and debug things. And as I said, Android devices are really nice to have, but you don't actually have to have them. Although, what I always do is let all your family know that whenever they get rid of their old phones, you want them. That's what I always do. Everyone in my family knows that they're getting a new iPhone, a new Android. Give me their old phone. I'll even pay them what they could get for it from someone else. So, for the reverse engineering part, I use Dexterjar APK tool and JVBUI. I know there's something that combines all that, but I got used to doing it, and it really takes, what, 15 seconds to run those 3 commands, so I'm not sure what the use of the combine tool is. It probably takes 5. And then I use Burp Suite generally for all the web stuff. For iOS, you always need a Mac, because you can't look at any of that stuff on a Windows machine. You need Xcode, your iOS SDKs, which will give you OTool. You really need an iPhone or 2 or 3, several in different versions. And you really have to jailbreak them, although that is illegal in some countries. You need a way to get your files off, which iFunbox was great until iOS 8.4 when it stopped working. IDV is a good tool. Again, I use Burp for the network stuff. You need IDA and Hopper to do the reverse engineering of the apps. Cycrypt is great for doing things dynamically inside, and I sometimes like using Snoopit. But there are a lot of other tools out there for iPhone. So I'm sure that some of you will actually know some great ones.
Yeah, for the network lab that we set up, I mean, you're just going to want an extra router. It doesn't really matter. You just want something that works. Additionally, though, you might want to verify that if there's security issues that are known with that router, because some things you can execute attacks through the universal plug and play. And for the monitoring network traffic, you want to get like an external USB adapter. I know that they make ones that are not alphas, but I've never actually seen one. Additionally, you want to make sure it's aircraft compatible if you're using that. So if you go to Aircraft's website, they'll actually have a list of ones that will run there. So again, that's probably why a lot of people use alphas. For the software part of it, I just used Wireshark, Aircraft, NG, and TCP dump, which those are all built-in Kali tools. Just like what she was saying, there are lots of ways to do some of this stuff. So if it works for you, then it's obviously the best way, even if it's something different than what we did.
For the web tools, like this one, I mean, everyone already has their favorites. Use whatever things you like. I like to use Burp Suite. I generally use Nick2, development tools, and Firefox. I always use Firefox when I'm doing web testing as opposed to Chrome. Although I use Chrome for all my personal browsing. I like some of the things like Durbuster, Cool, SQL Map, BAP, which is a Burp extension. I enjoy using Obviously, there are tons of web tools, and most people already have their favorites. For API tools, they're going to be very similar to the web, except you're going to have some specific extensions depending on what your API is. There are burp extensions that deal with WSDL and JSON and such. So depending on what the API is, you'll need something specific. And you sort of have to wait and identify what the API format is first.
Now, in terms of the hardware tools, I was trying to do this as cheaply as possible. So anyhow, what you want is a screwdriver set. If you get one, try to find one that has the precision screwdrivers, the smaller sized ones, because sometimes they're going to be very small screws. Additionally, a lot of them nowadays have the little nylon, there's like a spludget or whatever it's called. It's like a little nylon crowbar that you use for opening like phone cases or things like that. You're going to want a soldering iron, solder remover. In my case, I just went and used the regular TTL USB cable. They're like $10. There are lots of nice things to have, like bus tires, Raspberry Pis, etc. The thing is that I would caution you that if you're not really sure why you need something, I probably wouldn't buy it. I don't want you getting mad at me about it because you bought something and never even took it out of the box. But I mean, I just feel like it's probably better to sort of, if you're going to get something with a purpose. Additionally, in terms of soldering, if you've never soldered anything before, you probably want to find something that you don't really care about to do at first. Soldering is sort of a skill set, sort of like painting or drawing. You might have a really good idea in your head of what you're doing, but your hands and the device might not necessarily cooperate, and then bad things happen.
Left off this list that he also used was a multimeter, which we meant to add to the slide when we noticed it last night, but didn't.
We have a baby who just got some teeth, so yeah, there's a little bit of a distraction. But in terms of the multimeter, like, instead of going through it with I see we got a little extra time, so I can extrapolate on this. Instead of using like a logic probe or an oscilloscope to determine which ports were which on the UART, I used a multimeter. You're able to determine, in the case of the one I had there were only 3 ports, so you know that one of them is going to be ground, you know one of them is going to be transmit, and one of them is going to be receive. If you kind of figure out what about those voltages it should look like, it's pretty easy to guess at that point. But and again, I mean, I was trying to do it at a certain point. It was kind of turning into a weird thing of pride about trying to want to do it as cheaply as possible. So I figured a $10 multimeter versus an oscilloscope or a logic probe was really the way to go.
All right, so some things I would recommend for further reading if you're into hacking Internet of Things. There's a really good book by Brian Russell called Practical Internet of Things Security. Obviously, there's a link to the special publication 800-183 that I mentioned earlier, which is worth a read, as I said, because it's probably a basis for further NIST papers on security that they're going to publish later, maybe this year if we're lucky. Then there's a link to the Internet of Things People Report, and the Hack the World blog actually was a great site for starting hardware hacking, because we said
Yeah, I consulted this as I was working on this because they actually had this example where they walked through doing this with a router. Unfortunately, the one that they were using was a lot easier to solder than the device I got. It was I thought that I'd be able to get one and buy normal size pins and just push those through there, and apparently it was actually very, very close together instead, so it was a little bit more difficult. But yeah, it's a great site in terms of learning how to do some of that stuff if you're just sort of starting from zero.
Right, and so we have our contact information, and if anyone wants that, I have Twitter. He does not. He hates it. So, and besides that, we'd love to answer any questions, and we probably talked a little fast. Sorry.
Yeah. Additionally, yeah, in terms of if anyone wanted to, I could kind of go into the hardware process on that. Is that okay with everybody? Okay. So let's see if I can find that picture here. Yeah. Could you do that for me, please?
Yeah.
But so once I took the multimeter and there it is. But once I took the multimeter on there for the UART ports and determined that that was the ground, that one was transmitted, and that one was received, I ran through the jumpers and then soldered the ends off into there so that I could run the TTL cable to it. I just ran that through a Raspberry Pi and used Minicom to communicate with the device. Like I was saying earlier, during the boot sequence, there's just a, in order, if you need to pause it, press the any key. So I did that, and then it just drops you into shell. So, I mean, this was, yeah, there wasn't anything to it. So, I mean, like I was trying to say, if you find some of this stuff intimidating, I mean, I was really scared to solder something because, fire. But, I mean, I was able to get this on first try. So, don't feel like that there's anything bad there. Yes?
A hardware hacking note on serial ports. It's important to know if you're dealing with 5-volt TTL or 3.3-volt TTL, because the COM port on the back of your old classic computer is 5 volts, and the Pi and those 6-pin headers are 3.3.
Yeah, that's another reason why you want to use the multimeter to verify if you're looking at 3 voltage or 5 volt. Because, again, that could also be a very unpleasant surprise. My case, I was a little less concerned about it because there wasn't a power cable. But, that's totally something to look at. Thanks about that. But, I mean, again, I thought it was really intimidating. It really wasn't once you actually get started. That's the hardest sort of thing sometimes, is to just sort of get over the inertia and get started in the first place. Does anybody have any questions? Yes, sir.
I've heard some people do IoT hacking research where they will just watch the usage of the device and compare it and contrast it against its intended usage. You ever
Are you talking about like watching the network traffic?
Yeah, just like let's sit there and watch it run for a day or two and start asking, why is this thing calling home at 3 o'clock in the morning?
Yeah,
nobody's really using it.
That's actually how we determined it was dialing out to all those random cloud portals. But I just let it run for 2 days and went through with Wireshark and looked at the traffic afterwards. Yes, sir.
You guys, you put your security resources up there. You didn't mention the MUD stuff, manufacturer usage design. You know what that?
I'm sorry, I really can't hear you.
The MUD, MUD. You guys didn't mention that. What's your opinion on that? Right.
Oh, okay. The problem is that it doesn't seem like anybody's gotten far enough along the process to really have an opinion about it. I mean, I like the idea, but I also see, given some of the players involved, I see where things might go a little weird. I mean, ideally, the more open that these, it's like what the guy before us was saying. I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name earlier, but it's like they were saying about the open source stuff. If you can see what's going on, that's great. If things are actually getting fixed, that's great. The problem that I have is that since nobody's completed it, I don't know if those things are being done. Yes, ma'am.
Are you planning to go full disclosure on this at some point to help protect locations of children?
I'm not really sure about the legal issues there, and I don't really like being sued. In terms of that, I'm not really sure what we can do because it kind of seems like they change the name of the company fairly frequently on a lot of these. One thing that I actually did not do any looking at how people hardware hack these specific devices until after I was done because I didn't want to have anything sort of, prejudice what I was going to do on it. And after doing a lot of research on it, there are actually this is one of the more secure models. There are a lot of them that actually have hard-coded passwords of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And
is there any precedent to maybe inform Amazon about this? Maybe they'll quit selling it?
Yeah. I'm trying to be tactful here.
I have actually seen the tactic of putting some of the results in a 1-star review. I've seen security research do that when they do not get a response from the manufacturer.
Yeah, it probably works better for people that have a lot of friends that can do it too, but...
But they'll contact you to try to get you to take the response down, and then you have some email address.
But yeah, when we tried sending contacts to them, we got no reply whatsoever.
And we tried more than once.
But that's what you said. Use the 1-star.
Yeah, that's an interesting tactic I hadn't thought about.
I've seen Matthew Gear do that with this here in his IoT research, and he gets actually pretty good hit rate from that.
Yeah, I figure that's also something that probably works better if you're sort of well known in the community or have a lot of friends, and I don't really.
I didn't know Matthew was because they obviously didn't do any security research in their products either.
Yeah.
Did someone over there have a question?
Oh, sorry.
Did you get any identifiers from the hardware itself? In the sense, is it a generic board that was kind of picked up in Shenzhen, or is it a family resemblance?
Yes, it was. It was just a generic. But the setup was through BusyBox. but it was just a regular generic setup. The board itself was grain. I can say that without, I mean, it's on the picture, but they make a lot of hardware. They weren't the manufacturer of the camera, but they make a lot of underlying hardware for a lot of devices in general. In terms of any of their stuff, none of it was problematic. It was the Linux bot, you know, the Linux distro that they set up, the camera manufacturer set up, that was the problem.
A personal non-security thing. The Rapid 7 has a lot of, well, no, this part's security. Rapid 7 has published a lot about insecure baby monitors. So you can also look at that report.
Yeah, it does seem like baby monitors, there's a big overlap between baby monitors and IP cameras in general, and yeah, there does seem to be a lot of significant security issues with them. I mean, again, a lot of them that we were seeing when we were looking into them, they had hard-code passwords of 1 through 6.
Have you thought of just reverse engineering the control stream coming back from their server and re-implementing it on a secure device on your own network?
No, because that would be illegal, so I wouldn't tell you about it.
I'm sorry, I'm putting up security cameras at my own house, and so what I did was I went with an Amazon product that was #1, not this one. It is power over Ethernet, and I'm wiring them up, and I'm the Ethernet connections in a big glob of great stuff spray foam, and it's on to the power over Ethernet switch, which has. I'm providing it a server that provides its time server and all the network services it needs, so they're not even routed.
Yeah, I don't think you can see it in the picture on this one. But this board, the board itself is kind of a generic board that Grain puts out that a lot of people use. But there actually was a power over Ethernet function, but there wasn't anything plugged into it, so you could actually solder something to it to create that functionality. Yes, sir.
Just about these cameras on Shodan.
I didn't look for that specific one I showed him, but it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, I figured I knew the device was insecure, so I just didn't really see a point looking at it at that point. It just sort of seemed like cheating.
Yeah.
Well, thank you everybody for having us. This is the second time I've ever actually talked to anyone before, so this is kind of nerve-wracking for me. I'm not used to being invited to places.